Hello, Slicey Dicers. This is Brian with another knife video for you. Today we have the Kershaw Tumbler. This is a brand new for 2020 model from Kershaw. They are pumping out the 2020s right now. They're coming out everywhere. This is one of the first ones I want to get my hands on, mostly because you guys asked me to. And it's pretty cool. It is a new budget knife from Kershaw. I'm using the little air quotes there because it is $67.95, $68 basically. Not exactly inexpensive, but you are getting D2 steel, KVT ball bearings, and some really nice scales. An awesome Sinkovich design. It looks pretty darn good, I do have to say. And G10 scales with carbon fiber over top of them. It does appear to be actual real carbon because you can see they mill these lines in it and stuff. So I think it is real carbon, but it's a very, very thin layer of such if it is. And also subframe lock design, which is pretty neat. And I love the pivot on this. Looks kind of like a hubcap of some kind or something. I really do like it. I just like the overall shape of it. I like the overall look of it a whole lot. Ergonomics are excellent. We'll get to that as we go on. Pretty unique pocket clip. Not unique, but you know, for Kershaw, fairly unique. It is completely ambidextrous. You can just take this one screw out and switch it over, which is pretty nice. Yeah, and build quality seems to be pretty darn good. Only a couple of little things I noticed before we get into specs and size comparison, all that. Like, you have this nice milling on the carbon here, but then it stops at the pivot. So at the top there, you just have plain old kind of overly shiny carbon. These little lines kind of do mitigate, you know, that it's a bit cheaper looking carbon, but you have that one spot up there that still looks a bit cheap. Same on the other side. And in the logo that says China is in the detemp ball track. Doesn't seem to affect anything, but it is there. Just something I noticed. And also the Sinkovich design is really pushing the limits of being on that flat. I guess they still got it though, so I can't knock it for that. But pretty slick looking design and a lot of good things going for it. We'll get onto those after we do some specs and some size comparisons. So you have an overall length of 7.5 inches, blade length of 3.25 inches, blade thickness pretty darn thin at 0.12 inches. Handle thickness, also pretty thin at 0.44 inches, and a weight of just 2.6 ounces. Not bad at all for a knife this size. How do they do that? Well, it's just the subframe lock, and then everything else is G10. And you know what? It feels pretty solid. I'm not going to knock them for that at all. You have this nice full back spacer. It's a pretty darn well-constructed knife. A whole lot of companies do that kind of stuff, so not going to knock them there. Obviously, there are inserts for the bearings and everything. But it's primarily just constructed of G10. Now, size comparisons. Let's do our usual Spyderco sandwich. We have the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. It's a little bit smaller than that. Try and line up the pivots here on that one line there. And then we have your Para 3. We have just a bit bigger than a Para 3, a little bit smaller than a PM2. And next up, we will do our usual Benchmades. We have your full-size Griptilian and the full-size Bug Out. Yeah, as I expected. I hadn't held these two side by side, but yeah, almost exactly the same size as a Bug Out in overall length. It's obviously a bit of a taller knife, but... And now we're going to do some more budgety knife comparisons. These are knives I don't bring out very often. I was actually just rearranging my knife collection today, and I forgot, God, I don't bring these out very often on camera. This is the large size Honey Badger. It happens to be the Warren Cleaver blade version. And we'll also bring out the medium. So yeah, it's just a little bit bigger than the medium, a little bit smaller than the large. And we'll bring out one of its brethren here really quick. This is also a Sinkovich design, also a Kershaw. This is the Atmos, a little bit less expensive knife, just to give you an idea of the size of that. This Sinkovich design is much more reminiscent of the ZT 0460, 0462, that kind of more swoopy-ish design. He has sort of two design languages, really, looking at his stuff. It's either looks like the Atmos or looks swoopy, you know, like an 0460. And then lastly, we're on a couple of CRKTs, one of which, this one, you may see in a battle to the death at some point, because these are both knives that a lot of people are clamoring. This is a CRKT Montosa in this budget range, so I may compare those two. fairly similar in price. The Montosa is a little bit cheaper, but not quite as good at materials. And we have the CRKT Pete. So yeah, just a hair bigger than a Montosa. I know that sounds like a country song or something. I don't know. So a hair bigger than a Montosa. All right, let's talk more about this knife. The blade, yes, D2 steel. I will admit I don't have a ton of experience with Kershaw's D2. I'm not going to doubt it, if it's good or if it's bad or whatever. I just don't have a ton of experience with it, but it is D2. Not corrosion resistant, so you might want to put a little bit of something on there, like your Aegis EDCI. I still swear to God I don't get any money from them, but I do show the bottle all the time because it's just really handy stuff to have around. And in my climate, in upstate New York, I don't really worry that much about the corrosion stuff anyway. D2's always been fine with me, especially if you put that on there. About 25 thousandths behind the edge, not screaming thin, not like a Civivi or something would be, but very, very super slicey because it's just still that extremely thin blade stock, and it came razor sharp out of the box. Kershaw, budget or not budget, USA, China, whatever, they usually come pretty darn sharp. Sometimes the bevels aren't exactly even, but they're always sharp. This one is completely even. Really nice blade. It does have kind of a Persian-y sort of look to it. Again, like I said, it's reminiscent of the 0460 or 0462, but the actual cutting edge is pretty normal. It's still mostly belly, but you do get a little bit of flat in there, and pretty good tip on it. Very good, just EDC use. It's a bit stylish for sure, but I think it's a pretty darn good blade. Ergonomics are really, really good. Nice curved handle, fits my hands perfectly. The jimping up here, I could almost stand to be a bit more, which I rarely say that, but could stand to have a bit more aggressive jimping. And I guess if you're being super picky, maybe some of the edges on the G10 are a little sharp, but I don't think they're worth doing anything about. But the overall shape and the pocket clip disappears, no hot spots. It's really kind of a joy to carry. At least I have large size hands with skinny fingers. I guess I could imagine if you had more medium or smaller hands that you might notice some of the sharp edges a little bit more because, your hands would just be touching it more. But in how I carry it, I don't really notice them. I think it's perfectly fine. You notice it like when you're like rubbing your hands on it, but not actually in the use. How does it carry? Not bad. I will say I had some fears because I was looking at it like in pictures and stuff, and one place had pictures of it sideways like this, and I thought, oh my God, they've done it again. If you guys remember my review of the ZT-0357, I'll bring that out here. This is the new, budget ZT. I was kind of annoyed because the shape of this pocket clip, there's no like flat spot like you have in a lot of deep carry clips. If I have one here, yeah. For example, on the CRKT, not only do they recess the screws on a much less expensive knife, which is nice, you see it's got that little bit of flat on it, so you don't have to worry about catching it on there. This one, it just comes straight down. There's screws there to catch. Looked at pictures of the Tumbler, and I thought, oh, cool, it's got a much better pocket clip. That's not going to be a problem, but they still have screws under it because it's for the subframe lock. They still have 3 screws under there that are not recessed for the subframe lock, and I thought in pictures, oh, this is going to be a problem. Like I thought for sure this was going to be a pretty significant issue. It turns out not to really be. It's still not the smoothest thing to slide in and out of your pocket, but it's not because of those screws. It's because of the striations that I mentioned earlier. It pretty much goes by the screws if you're sliding in jeans. I imagine if you have much thinner material, it's not going to move that clip up enough, and you might feel those screws a bit more. But in jeans and stuff, it's fine. It's just all the milling in the handle it's not a pocket destroyer, but you do notice it sliding in and out. Not horrible though. And once it's in there, all you see is a tiny little clip and a little Kershaw logo. Do I wish they didn't have the logo on there? Of course I do, but it's okay. I'm not going to have a huge fit about that. Pretty easy to get your hand past. I think there are probably some other knives that are a bit easier, but this isn't bad at all, and it's so light and it's pretty thin. The flipper tab does stick out. You can feel it, but there's nothing sharp on it or anything. Carries pretty good. It's not the slimmest thing in the world in the pocket, but it ain't bad. You can see it doesn't take up much room. Carries pretty darn well. No complaints there. But like I said, just when you're sliding in and out, listen, you get that. I don't think it's going to ruin your pockets or anything. It's not like a Cold Steel or something, but, you know, just keep that in mind. Action-wise, 0 complaints there. D10's perfect. I've done nothing to this since I got it. Almost completely drop shutty. Sure it would be if I took it apart. That's pretty darn good. And again, when your fingers aren't all oily because you were working on another knife before you did a video because you're a moron, it snaps right out. There's a little bit of jimping on the flipper tab you get a hold of. Excellent, excellent D10. It just rockets. Not the most satisfying noise in the world because it's mostly G10. It does sound a bit plasticky, but you can't argue with how it works. So overall, what do I think of this knife? It's 68 bucks, and there objectively better options on paper. Abso-freaking-lutely there are. You know, the Shaola, for example. Obviously, I like this knife because it was our budget knife of the year last year. Obviously, it's a bit less expensive. It's a better option. There's stuff that's even a whole lot less expensive. You could argue that the Honey Badger, I had it before. These are like, what, 30? No, well, and then the D2, I guess they're coming up to 50 bucks. But you can get a lot of D2 flippers. You're just entering into a whole world of a whole lot of D2 flippers. But that said, this is a really nice looking Sinkovich design. And there is something to be said for that. There's also something to be said for buying from Kershaw. That's a US-based company. Even though this knife was made in China, they're still US-based. I would feel a lot more confident in their warranties than some of the other companies that you might be looking at that are, you know, because you can get a knife like this with these same kind of specs for 20, 30 bucks all day long if you look around on the internet. But good luck if it breaks. And I would feel a bit more confident with Kershaw. Is it worth it? Does that make it worth 68 bucks? I don't know. It's a really darn good knife. Absolutely cannot argue with that. Yeah, but the price is, it's kind of pushing it. I'm not going to say it's over the top, but it's stretching the limits. But it is a really, really cool design, and I do really like carrying it, and I do really like the feel of it in my hand, and I like just looking at it. It looks great. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've been Brian. Have a good one.